So I'm pretty sure everyone knows by now OnePlus is a major phone company in the US, worldwide pretty much. A phone that they released in 2019, barely 2 years ago, it was, towards the end of 2019, was the OnePlus 7T Pro. And what was crazy about this device was, unfortunately, I didn't pick it up the time it came out, but I really wish I did because this phone had a lot of capability. And so far, what I can still tell you is the OnePlus 7T Pro is a very good device still in 2021, and I can only see this phone still getting better and better year after year. What OnePlus was able to do at this time for this device is actually really good. And when you look at the outside and the whole entire body of it, it's still one of its strongest assets for sure. Now I'll find the cheapest OnePlus 7T Pro and, link them down in the description below, as well as a couple other phones that I'd recommend this year, for the cheapest prices. I'll find them on Amazon, link them down below. You guys can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now the front of the OnePlus 7T Pro has that 6.67-inch Fluid AMOLED display, and still to this day I get shivers whenever I look at this, panel, because it was just so ahead of its time. It didn't have a hole punch display. It had that pop-up camera, which, for the better or for worse, at least it had it. And the panel itself, when you look at this phone, what more could OnePlus have done to make this device a better device? I don't think anything they could have done to make it look better. Obviously, there were things internally, other things like that. But when it came down to the panel itself, how much better could you get? It was completely bezel-less for the most part, a little bit of bezel on the top and bottom. But other than that, it looked really good at the end of the day. You have the fingerprint sensor in the display as well. You have USB Type-C on the bottom as well, which is great. Pop-up camera, like I stated. Now, you don't have any IP certification on this device, which is kind of annoying. I wish it did have that capability. Unfortunately, it doesn't. So again, there's nothing we can really do about it. But I do wish at the end of the day, it did have some type of capability like that. And on the back, you have a glass back on this device as well. And like I stated before, this is still a really good feeling back on this specific device. And I think at the end of the day, this is still one of probably the most premium devices that came out of 2019. I think the OnePlus 7 Pro obviously is, it's pretty much the same thing as this, but it's still a humongous contender when it comes down to the feeling. And it was definitely one of my favorite phones of 2019 as well. Now, it's not perfect. It does have a couple of pitfalls, no micro SD card slot support for a 2019 phone. That would have been cool. Now, no IP certification as well. So the durability of this phone really isn't super high. If you get some water on it or whatever, there's no chance of telling what it could possibly, be happening with it. But also there's no wireless charging as well. So in one way, the body of this phone is a top tier feature, but also it's kind of a downside because you're missing a lot of things that, all the new devices kind of have. All the new devices, excluding the OnePlus 8, but all the other devices have wireless charging and things like that. This one does not have that. So if you're somebody who cares a lot about it, then obviously, you have to keep that in mind. But in terms of the outside and the body, that really pretty much covers it up. Now, camera wise, I'll go ahead and hit on the camera since we're already on the back. It did have a triple camera setup on the back, and as I stated before, this camera, at least it has the triple camera threat, the triple threat, which I always call it. It has the 48 megapixel wide angle lens, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, then a 16 megapixel ultra wide sensor. And as I stated before, as long as you have these three camera lenses, you are pretty much set for the most part. So luckily we do have the capability of doing 4K at 60, which is great. Now, does it have the most crazy amount of capability ever? Not really, and I don't even think the photo quality is all that great, even for a 2019 phone. I think devices like the iPhone 11 and the iPhone, or the Galaxy S10 for that matter, have much better camera lenses than this thing. But as stated before, I think at the end of the day, it's still a pretty good camera setup, and I think anybody who's going to use a specific camera is probably going to be okay for the back camera. I think it's probably still a huge asset. Unfortunately, the front camera is a little bit different. So first of all, it is that motorized pop-up camera, and I've said this before and I'll say it again. I like the fact that this thing had a hole punch less display, so it didn't have any hole punch display or anything, but I hate the fact of that motorized pop-up camera. I really didn't like it. It was one more piece to break, and it wasn't even that great of a camera. For that big of a module, it was a 16 megapixel sensor, which is great, but only 1080p at 30. They could have done way better on that if I'm being completely honest. So when it came down to it, definitely not one of my favorite things about this device. I think the back camera was overall pretty good, but the front camera kind of ruined it for me, to be completely honest. So in terms of that, in terms of the camera, that really pretty much covers it up. Now moving on to probably the best thing about the OnePlus 7T Pro in 2021. This is a mixture of both the software and the battery life. So this thing, first of all, Oxygen OS, I've said this before and I'll pretty much say it forever. It's probably my favorite version of, Android. I think it's maybe even a little bit better than stock Android based on the features and everything you're getting. Now with Android 11 Oxygen OS 11 or whatever they're going to call it isn't really looking to be as crazy or as good as I wanted it to be. It's looking pretty, unstockish in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, as I stated before, it's a huge thing to keep in mind that a phone like this still has software support that's actually more stock than not. And when you turn on this phone and when you're going through the UI and all that stuff, I mean, this is a very, very smooth phone. No matter which way you look at it, no matter what you do, you're pretty much going to be getting a smooth experience. And with that 90 Hz refresh rate on this, phone as well, that just makes this overall experience that much smoother. And you know what? I've said this before and I'll say it for years and years and years. Having that 90 Hz is like having, 120 Hz almost. I mean, it really does increase the fluidity of the phone. So a mixture of the stock, almost stock and, beautiful software with a lot of features inside of it with that 90 Hz refresh rate at the end of the day makes this phone feel so much better than it really is, to be honest, in a lot of other areas. And it kind of covers up the lack of, IP certification and some other things too. Now, the battery life of this thing also is aided with the software because it doesn't have a lot of processes running in the background, but you also have that 4085 mAh battery in it. And at the end of the day, I think it's more of a pro than a con too. Now, we are kind of in that phase where we're getting like 5000 mAh batteries and stuff, but I think the battery size is fine. I think the refresh rate, I think the software really enhances the fact that this thing does have a higher refresh rate and a bigger display. And I actually do think those two things are probably the best assets of this device. Even though it doesn't have wireless charging or reverse wireless charging, at least it has pretty good battery life still, and it still has a long software support and custom ROMing and rooting and all that good stuff. So for sure, at the end of the day, this is probably the strongest asset for the OnePlus 7T Pro in 2021. Now, performance-wise, the OnePlus 7T Pro has a pretty good spec sheet inside of it too. I mean, this thing has that Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 Plus chipset, an octa-core CPU, an Adreno 640 GPU, and 8 gigs of RAM on the base model, and then 12 gigs of RAM on that top tier model. And to give you some perspective, the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, I think that just came out, or so the S20, whatever it was, actually has, only gets topped out at 8 gigs of RAM. The Galaxy S21 and the S21 Plus only get 8 gigs of RAM, which is pretty crazy. And this phone is way cheaper than those ones. So at the end of the day, when you have a device like this, as stated before, you're going to be getting a really good amount of RAM on a device, even for the stock model, on a device that has pretty stock software, which is great. And I think the performance of this phone is also another huge asset of it. And when you're doing anything with this phone, it's going to be aided in that 90 Hz refresh rate too. So at the end of the day, whatever you're going to do with it is going to be perfectly fine. Whether you're doing, basic tasks, or you're, speeding it up, you're doing a little bit more, you're going to be having a really good capable, device from the OnePlus 7T Pro. Whether you're doing basic tasks like texting people, multitasking between apps, split screen multitasking, all the good stuff, video calls, whatever you're going to do, I had a good time with it, and I think you're going to have a good time with it too. But even stepping it up to, heavier intensive gaming and that side of things, you're also going to be getting a really good performing phone from this type of device as well. And at the end of the day, when you're using this phone, when you're messing around with it, you're going to be having a very smooth and very good performance from this type of device for sure. So in terms of performance, thumbs up for me. It's still 100% of a capable device, and it's not even 2 years old. It's like a year and a half old. So you're going to be perfectly fine with a device like this. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. Now, to answer the question, is the OnePlus 7T Pro still worth it in 2021? Well, if you couldn't tell by now, this phone is still completely worth it in 2021. And here are just a couple of reasons why. I mean, first of all, the OnePlus 7T Pro's display is still extremely good. I mean, even though it's, maybe it's not the highest, craziest refresh rate of 120 Hz, but you still have that 90 Hz refresh rate, and you do actually have, almost a bezel-less phone with no hole punch display or anything. Now, I don't even care about the hole punch display that much, but the fact that this phone looks like it does, it's just so crazy to me in so many different ways. So for sure, that aspect in and of itself is a huge thing about this phone for sure. The performance of this phone is still extremely good, and if you get the maxed out model, that has more than enough RAM for pretty much everything you're going to do with it. You have a very good feeling back and just a good feeling phone in general. It feels really good. You have a really good back camera as well, so really whatever photos you're going to take, Snapchats, TikToks, whatever you're going to do, the back camera is probably more than capable enough for a lot of people to go ahead and take photos and stuff from. The software by far is still one of my favorite softwares probably out there. It's like kind of right next to stock Android, but it's way better than One UI, way better than whatever Xiaomi makes. It's a really good version of software, and this thing's still going to be getting support for many years to come, and it has custom ROMs and all this good stuff. I mean, this phone still has a long life ahead of it for sure, but it's not perfect. it does have a couple of pitfalls in my opinion. I feel like the motorized pop-up camera is a very novelty thing. I mean, it gets old so fast, and it's just something that really rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know if it rubs everyone else the wrong way, but I really wasn't a big fan of it if I'm being completely honest. The lack of IP certification, no microSD card slot, and I can even get over the microSD card slot, but no wireless charging, no reverse wireless charging on this device. Those are kind of like basic things that almost all phones have nowadays. Unfortunately, the OnePlus 7T Pro does not have any type of those capabilities, and I think that's kind of a problem. When you have a device like this, you want it to basically be able to do, have all the features in the world. Now, you're not going to be paying a crazy amount for this phone anymore compared to a lot of phones in the market right now, but I think at the end of the day, even with those pitfalls and everything, the OnePlus 7T Pro is still completely worth it in 2021. So that really pretty much covers it up for the most part. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly, everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.